The boy in 2A slumped sideways, eyes dulling, while the flight attendant's voice cracked on 5 words no one expected to hear at 30,000 feet: "We're out of meals." His mother reached for the call button with shaking fingers. "He needs to eat, now." 2 rows over, a man in a navy suit slammed his palm on his tray. "Excuse me, I paid 6 grand for this seat." The cabin turned, ice clinked in glasses. Someone muttered, "How do you run out in business?" The flight attendant pressed her earpiece. "Medical, is there a doctor on board?" The boy's lips were gray. "Mom," he whispered, dragging the word out. "I'm dizzy." "Type 1, the mother forced out. "He took insulin, he needs food." "I'll get snacks," another attendant said, already pushing the drink cart toward the curtain. "We're out," the first one said. "Galley's empty, all the mains were loaded short." The man in the suit laughed once, mean and small. "Short, fix it." In row 31, a man in a hoodie looked up from his knees. He'd been quiet for 8 hours. He had kept his bag under the seat and his eyes on the floor. Now he unzipped the bag. Garlic, soy, warm vinegar. The smell rolled forward like a memory someone had been holding in all day. He stood. "Miss," he called to the aisle, "if he needs food now, I have rice and adobo." Heads turned. The man in the suit turned too, nostrils flaring. "That smell is insane." The mother in 2A was already nodding. "Please." The lead flight attendant hesitated. Policy ran through his muscles. He looked at the boy's face and burned through that policy in one breath. "Bring it." The man from row 31 moved. He had the walk of someone who had spent many nights in loud kitchens, efficient, shoulders tight. He carried a soft cooler with patches sewn on by hand. His name, the kind heirs in the aisle didn't know yet, was Mateo Reyes. "Hot water?" he asked. "Bowls, anything." "Galley," the lead said, popping the curtain aside. "Come." They cleared a space. A flight attendant set a kettle to pour. Someone grabbed plastic bowls. Someone else found packets of juice. A third called the cockpit to let them know there was a medical situation and a strange smell in the forward galley, and no, it wasn't a fire. The man in the suit leaned into the aisle. "Is this even allowed? He could poison us." "Sir," the lead said without looking up, "please sit down." Mateo pulled out a container wrapped in a faded towel. He snapped the lid. The air shifted. It smelled like Sunday lunch in a small kitchen with the door open and a fan clicking out a rhythm almost as old as a family name. Chicken thighs, dark from soy and patience, oil glinting. A bay leaf pressed flat against the meat. No garnish, no fuss, food built to go the distance. He scooped rice into a bowl and nested it over a cup of hot water to warm. He squeezed a packet of lemon into the chicken and tasted with the back of a spoon. He nodded once. "Small bites," he said to the mother, not loud, just steady when the bowl reached her. "Juice first, then rice, then chicken, slow." The boy chewed. His throat moved like each swallow was a decision. The mother was crying and trying not to show it. The man in the suit went from angry to curious to something he'd call disgust later if someone asked. A minute passed, then another. Color climbed back into the boy's mouth. He blinked and focused. "Mom." "We're okay," she said, gripping his hand. A round of relief rolled through the front cabin. People let out breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. The lead nodded at Mateo like a thank you that ran deeper than words. Someone in 1F whispered, "What is that?" "Adobo," said one of the attendants, soft, like a prayer caught between tasks. "My Lola makes it." The mother looked up at the man with the cooler and mouthed, "Thank you." The boy managed a small grin. "That's good," he said, almost shy, a little alarmed by his own hunger. He looked 12. Mateo saw all of it and said, "Eat." He moved back toward the galley. His hand hovered over the container. He did a quick count in his head that only he knew the numbers for. He glanced at the empty oven racks. He glanced once at the seat map on the crew iPad when the lead set it down, then back at the chicken. He had enough to feed maybe 15 if he spread it thin, maybe 20 if he stretched it with something else. He had planned to feed only 2. At the gate, 4 hours earlier, the airline had swapped aircraft and lost a row. The woman at the counter had needed a volunteer to give up a business seat for a mother and a child. The mother had cried as she explained. Long night, tight connection. The boy's supplies were in a carry-on. She just needed him near the front. The lounge was closing. People were tired and done with other people's problems. Mateo had lifted his hand. "He can have mine." He had done the math then, too. It meant 5 more inches of legroom lost, 1 more rude elbow, a long night with his knees in his chest. It meant holding the bag between his feet for 15 hours instead of slipping it into a wide bin. He had looked at the boy's face then and seen the same fading color, and it had felt like a decision he'd already made. At the end of the counter, the man in the navy suit had yelled because his upgrade hadn't cleared. Now, back in the galley, Matteo opened the second container. Pandezel. Soft rolls brown to the exact shade of a morning he hadn't seen in 2 years. He took out a small jar with whole black peppercorns sleeping in vinegar. He took out a bag of sliced cucumbers he had tossed with sugar and salt before he left the apartment. It was all the kind of food that forgave being made at midnight and carried through a morning. Food that traveled. The lead peered into the cooler. Is there enough to? I can't ask. You didn't, Matteo said. He held up a hand to the crew. I can do small portions, first row first, pregnant, diabetic, elderly. Then aisle seats for speed. I'll need gloves, a tray. We'll help, the attendant in the jump seat said, already pulling supplies. Yes, chef. He flinched at the word and then let it land. It wasn't wrong. He had worked the pass in busy kitchens, had called picks and sent plates fast enough to make a room go quiet. He had stood before businessmen with napkins in their collars and made them shut up with soup. But this wasn't a dining room. This was a tube with wings and a thin seam of mercy running through the floor. They set up a line. Bread, rice, chicken, cucumber quick pickle, a dab of vinegar, a wedge of lemon. The man in the suit leaned closer, sniffing. I'm allergic to garlic, he said, as if the word itself offended him. He wasn't. His wife glanced at him and then at the bowls, hungry and embarrassed. We have fruit, one attendant said, polite without patience. I want beef. The tenderloin, he said. There is no tenderloin, sir, the lead said. There was never. Figure it out. The boy in 2A took a second bite. He smiled at Matteo in a way that did something small and dangerous in the back of Matteo's throat. Is this Filipino? Matteo nodded. The ear after his name warmed for the first time in hours. Yes, thank you, the boy said. Salamat. The word landed. The attendant in the jump seat blinked hard. She had said those syllables 1,000 times into her phone in tiny kitchens after midnight. Hearing them here in a voice still shaky from dropping blood sugar tightened her chest. They pushed the first tray down the aisle. A woman in 1A whose ankles were swollen took the bowl with both hands and inhaled like the smell might fix something besides hunger. The wife of the man in the suit took a small plate and said thank you with her eyes while her husband turned away and sent an email to someone with a subject line that would read complaint. In coach, heads were craning around the curtain while trying not to look like they were craning. The smell reached down the aisle and stopped conversations mid-sentence. A teenager in row 38 took out her phone to film and then put it down when she saw the boy in the front. Matteo plated. He moved quickly. He kept one eye on the container, one on the faces. He had packed this food to eat with his father on a plastic table in an apartment in Pasig. He had flown home with his mother in a jar he hadn't opened. He had planned the words to say about it, and then realized there weren't any. A thin envelope with his name in his mother's handwriting had been tucked under a dish towel in the cooler when he left the apartment. He had felt it brush his knuckles when he reached for the rice. He had not opened it yet. He'd wanted to wait until his father was sitting across from him and the room was loud with cousins and the music between songs. Now it sat under a stack of paper napkins while he fed a plane. Keep going, the lead said low, as if he could see the thought. We've got you. They hit a rhythm. The attendants assembled. Matteo spooned, cucumber, vinegar, bread. The line moved, the cabin softened. Voices went from sharp to low. People who would have never spoken on the ground were asking, how is it? And answering, better than anything I've had up here. Someone at the front asked for the recipe. The attendant in the jump seat laughed. Garlic and patience, she said, and the woman in 1A smiled like she knew exactly what that meant. By the time they reached row 4, the man in the suit stood, blocking the aisle with his shoulders. I get 2, for me and my wife. The lead said, sir, 1 per person. We're making it stretch. You don't tell me how to eat, the man said, grabbing at the tray. A roll tumbled. The bowl rocked. Matteo put a hand on the tray and looked at him. No heat, no show. Others first. The man smirked. Do you know who I am? A hungry man, Matteo said. It wasn't clever. It was true, and it was the only thing that put the man back into his seat. He sat, flaring his nostrils, and made a note to call his assistant as soon as the wheels touched down. They served the boy again, a smaller portion. The mother held the bowl steady like it contained something beyond food. "We saw you at the gate," she said, eyes bright with recognition that had been fighting through adrenaline. "You gave up your seat. You were the one." Matteo had been moving fast enough to outrun that moment. The words made him slow. He nodded once. "You needed it." The mother's mouth tilted like gratitude had nowhere to go and might just spill. "We planned to buy food after takeoff. He fell asleep." "I didn't." "You're here," Matteo said. "He's okay." The boy looked between them, connecting dots. A small crease between his eyebrows unfolded. "You gave Mom your seat," Matteo shrugged. "You can pay me back when you're tall enough to reach the overhead bin without standing on the armrest." The boy laughed. It surprised both of them. They kept serving. When the container was 2/3 empty, the attendant in the jump seat leaned close. "Chef, how much left?" 19 portions, he shot back without looking. It was a lie told in the key of hope. He had fed bigger families with less. They hit the last row of business and then the first row of premium economy. A man in the bulkhead clapped once, a quiet gratitude that landed in the seats around him and turned into more. The lead took a breath and pushed the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to a very generous passenger in the main cabin, we have something for those of you who didn't receive a meal this evening. Please be patient as we come through the aisles." He didn't say the passenger's name. He didn't ask for applause. He kept it in the middle lane. The cabin ignored the lane and clapped anyway. Matteo's hands didn't stop. He slid the last piece of chicken onto a roll and pressed it down. He rubbed his thumb over the slick, grateful surface of an empty container. He had a half jar of vinegar left. He had a palmful of peppercorns. He had rice starch drying on his fingers. He had a plane full of full mouths and a father on the other end of the night. The man in the suit took one bowl in the end. He huffed as if forced to. He lifted the spoon and took a bite. He paused. He didn't say anything. He ate the rest. His wife leaned toward Matteo as the tray passed. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It was too quiet to travel." Matteo caught it and said nothing back. He didn't have anything to give her in that language. Coach watched a show with no screen. Heads bobbed above headrests. A boy in row 28 whispered, "That's the guy who cooked," and his grandmother in row 28 tapped his hand and said, "Hush, let him work." When it was done, the lead pressed a chocolate square into Matteo's hand like an apology he couldn't put on paper. "From the amenity kit," he said. "For you." Matteo grinned despite the ache rising under his ribs. "That's the fancy stuff." The attendant in the jump seat brought a glass with bubbles in it and kept her eyes down, unsure if it was okay to break rules for the man who had just broken a rule to make everything okay. "Sparkling water," she said with a wink so exaggerated it turned the drink into a joke. "Thank you," he said. He took the glass and tipped it toward the front. He thought of his mother. He tipped it toward the back. He thought of the apartment with its thin walls. He took a sip and chased vinegar with bubbles. He sat back in row 31 when the trays were gone and the smell had settled into the vents. He slid the envelope out from under the napkins. He turned it over, his name in cheap blue ink. The loop on the O looked like she'd paused and laughed mid-stroke at something he didn't hear. He didn't open it. He put it back. He looked at the empty container and the half roll of Pandazol sitting alone. He broke it in half and wrapped it in a napkin without thinking about who it was for. The boy in 2A had color in his lips and a piece of rice on his chin. He was talking to his mother in a voice that didn't float. It sat square on the tray table and asked what time it was and whether cartoons were available in the library of movies. The mother asked a flight attendant for a pen. She wrote something on a napkin and tucked it under the extra plastic cup on her tray. The cabin shifted into the slow hum of fed people. The chorus of complaints dropped to a distant murmur. Someone snored. The man in the suit opened his laptop and wrote with fury. Then he deleted half a sentence and stared at the wing. An hour passed. The lead came by with a clipboard. "Sir, can we get your name? We need to file a report." Matteo thought of 100 ways his name could go into a report that might get a gate agent in trouble for letting outside food past a policy. He shook his head. "Just write a passenger in coach and a lot of luck." The attendant in the jump seat made a face. "We can't, please, just in case." He exhaled and gave his name. "Matteo, Reyes." The attendant wrote it down neat. "Salamat Kuya," she said, soft. He nodded. He hadn't been called that in a while. It fit. They started descent over a field of city lights. The wheels moved in their grooves. People's phones lit up with notifications they couldn't open yet. The seatbelt sign bleeped. The lead made a landing announcement with a voice that had steadied. At the door, as people stood and stretched, the boy in 2A pulled free of his seatbelt. The mother tried to hold him down and then gave up. He walked back to row 31 with the swagger of someone still wobbly on the inside and brave on the outside. He held out the napkin. On it was a kid drawing of a pot with lines coming off it like a cartoon smell. There was a heart. Under the heart, in block letters pushed hard into the paper, it said Salamat Shefem. He was too tired for careful words. He just held it and let the image burn into him. "You're okay," he said. The boy grinned. "Because of your food, Mom says we'll tell people about you if it's okay." "Tell them about your pancreas first," Mateo said. The boy laughed. The mother rolled her eyes in relief. The boy leaned in like he was offering a trade. "My mom says you gave us your seat. You gave me a reason to stretch," Mateo said. It wasn't a joke, but the boy laughed anyway and went back to his row with a swag he would keep in the story every time he told it. Passengers filed out, passing him like a parade in reverse. They touched his shoulder without meaning to. They said thank you in different accents and different volumes. A woman in 1F cupped his hand between both of hers and pressed something small into it. It was a plastic-wrapped fortune cookie from her bag. It was ridiculous. It made sense. The man in the suit stood in the aisle like a monument no one asked for. He looked at Mateo and then looked away. His wife leaned around him. "That was beautiful," she said. Her eyes darted to the floor as if beauty was something that needed consent. "Thank you." "Safe trip," Mateo said. The lead waited near the door. "Captain wants to say thanks," he said. Mateo shook his head. "Share it with the crew." "We'll get you an upgrade for your next flight," the lead said. It was cheap, and it was everything they had to give. "Give it to the next person who needs to be near the front," Mateo said. He didn't say why he couldn't use it. He didn't say this was the flight. At the jet bridge, the attendant in the jump seat stopped him with a hand on his arm. She lifted the envelope from his cooler and placed it gently into his palm. He hadn't realized it had slipped out. He looked at her and saw her look at the loops of blue ink exactly the way he had. "Open it when you eat," she said. He nodded. Behind them, the cabin clapped again when the last row finally made it out, as if the applause had been waiting until every person who wanted to join had made it to the door. The sound moved through the galley and hit him from behind like a soft push forward. In the terminal, under a green sign that promised baggage and taxis and the rest of the world, a small crowd from the flight formed a messy circle around his path. They didn't block him. They didn't demand a photo. They just made space weirdly wide, like people did for someone carrying something fragile. A ground agent jogged up with a stack of snack boxes in her arms. "For your family," she said, breathless, cheeks red from running stairs. "From us." "It's not much." Mateo looked at the boxes, crackers, hummus, one sad olive each, and smiled like they were silver. "It's plenty." Out on the curb, the air hit him full in the face. He took his phone from his pocket and called a number he'd been avoiding because there weren't words for a lot of things. His father picked up on the second ring and said his name like it was both a question and an answer. The city noise ran under the line. Mateo closed his eyes and saw a plastic table. He saw a dozen plates. He saw a seat beside him with no one in it. "Pa," he said, and his voice didn't break. "I'm here." He reached into the cooler and felt around until his fingers found half a roll of Pandazel he had wrapped without thinking. It was still soft. He held it in his hand like a promise that could still be kept. Inside the bag, under the towel, the envelope waited. He slid a finger under the flap and opened it right there at the pickup curb, luggage tracks clicking by, voices rising and falling, the city pulling him back into itself. His mother's handwriting sat on the page. It was short. "Feed who is in front of you," it said. "There is always enough when you do not count." He laughed once, quiet. He folded the letter and slid it into his pocket. Behind him, the glass of the airport doors reflected a man in a hoodie and a crowd of strangers leaving a plane a little less angry than they had been when they boarded. In the reflection, he raised the Pandazel like a toast, then tucked the cooler under his arm and walked toward the person who was waiting.